They threw me away like trash. Years later, they begged me to save them, but I made them suffer just like they did to me. I was 12 years old when my parents abandoned me like I was nothing. I still remember the cold, the fear, the hunger that night replayed in my mind for years. They didn't just leave me behind. They erased me like I never even existed. And for years, I suffered alone, waiting for them to come back. But they never did. Growing up, I knew my parents never really loved me. They tolerated me. They fed me. They kept a roof over my head. But there was no warmth, no affection, no love. My younger brother Adam was the perfect son. He got all their attention, all their care, all their love, while I was just the extra child, the one they didn't need, the one they wished had never been born. At first, I thought, maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was overreacting. But as I got older, it became clear my mom would forget my birthday. But she would throw extravagant parties for Adam. My dad would ignore me for days, but take Adam fishing on weekends. Whenever there was a choice between me and him, they always chose him. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, but deep down it hurt. It ate away at me. Then one day they made their choice final. We were on a road trip, a so-called family vacation. But I should have known better. It was never about me. It was about them having a good time. Adam was in the back seat playing on his tablet. My parents were talking and laughing like I wasn't even there. Then my dad pulled into a gas station in the middle of nowhere. He turned to me and said, "Michael, get out for a second." I was confused, but I obeyed the second. My feet hit the pavement. He slammed the door, locked it, and drove off. At first, I thought it was a joke, a cruel prank. But as the car disappeared into the distance, I realized the truth. They weren't coming back. They had left me there, alone, in the middle of nowhere, with nothing. I ran after the car, screaming, crying, begging for them to stop. But they didn't even look back. I stood there for hours, waiting for them to return. But they never did that night. I slept behind a dumpster, freezing, hungry. Terrified my own parents had thrown me away like I was nothing. Like I didn't even matter. The days that followed were the worst of my life. I begged for food, I searched through trash, I got chased away by shop owners. People looked at me like I was disgusting, like I was worthless, just a dirty street kid. I was starving alone, hopeless. Then one night, an old man named George found me. He saw me curled up in an alley shaking from hunger. He didn't ask me questions. He didn't judge me. He just gave me food, a blanket, and a place to stay for the first time in my life. Someone actually cared about me. George became my new family. He wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. But he had a heart of gold. He taught me how to survive, how to work hard, how to fight for myself. He gave me something my parents never did hope. Years passed, and I worked harder than anyone. I studied day and night. I took every opportunity I could find. I built my own business from nothing, and I became successful beyond my wildest dreams. I was no longer the helpless boy they abandoned. I was powerful. I was respected. I had everything I ever wanted, except one thing: closure. Then one day, out of nowhere, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered, and the second I heard the voice on the other end, I froze. It was my mother. She was crying, her voice shaken. "Michael, please, we need your help." At first I thought it was a joke, but then she kept talking. She told me they had lost everything. My dad lost his job. They lost their house. My mom was sick, and Adam, the golden child, had abandoned them. They were homeless, starving, desperate. And now, after all these years, they were calling me, begging for help. I told them to meet me at a 5-star restaurant when they arrived. They looked nothing like the people I remembered. Their clothes were dirty, their faces hollow with hunger, their hands trembling. They looked at me with hope in their eyes, like they thought I would welcome them with open arms. I let them sit down, order whatever they wanted. They ate, like they hadn't seen food in weeks. Then I leaned in and asked, "Do you remember the last meal you had before you abandoned me? Do you remember what you ate while I was starving alone on the streets?" Their faces turned pale. My mother started crying. My father looked down in shame. I made them sit there and listen. I described every moment of my suffering in brutal detail. I told them about the nights I spent cold and alone, about the hunger that nearly killed me, about the people who treated me like trash, about George, the man who saved me when my own parents threw me away. They sat there in silence, guilt written all over their faces. Then they started apologizing, begging for forgiveness. They told me they had no choice. Back then, they thought Adam had a better future, so they sacrificed me to give him more. That was the moment I decided to make them suffer. I smiled and said, "I'll help you. But on one condition. You have to live the way I did for 1 month. I'll give you a tiny apartment. No heat, no food, no help. You have to beg for your meals. Just like I did. If you survive, I'll consider helping you more." They had no choice. They agreed. I watched as they struggled just like I had. They begged on the streets, they starved. They cried. They experienced exactly what they put me through. Every time they called me for help, I ignored them. Every time they asked for mercy, I laughed. A month passed and they came back to me, broken, weak, desperate. They dropped to their knees, begging, "Michael, please, we learned our lesson. Help us." I looked at them and said, "No, you left me to die. Now, you can do the same." And with that, I walked away and never looked back. They made their choice years ago, and now I made mine. I never spoke to them again. I moved on with my life. I built something from nothing. I created a future. Without them, they lost everything because of their own choices. They had a son who would have loved them unconditionally, but they threw him away for their favorite child. And in the end, he left them too. Karma always comes back in the end, and they got exactly what they deserved. If you think karma did its job perfectly, drop a like and subscribe for more insane Reddit stories.